I was 69 years old when my life nearly ended in the most unexpected way at a dinner table surrounded by my own family. Sometimes I still wake up at night replaying the moment my grandson leaned close, his eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "Grandma, you need to go, now." That night had started so ordinarily, almost beautifully. The table at the Riverside Grill gleamed with polished silver, soft candlelight, and expensive bottles of wine that my daughter insisted on ordering. It was supposed to be my son-in-law's birthday celebration, a small family dinner Julie had said over the phone. I'd hesitated. Of course, things between us had been strained ever since I refused to fund another one of Brad's doomed business schemes. But she had added the words that pierced straight into my heart. "Tyler asked if you'd come. He wants his grandma there." Tyler, my only grandson, the one bright thread in a web of betrayal. For him I went. For him I ignored the unease in my chest. The evening began pleasantly enough. My grandson hugged me so tightly when I arrived that for a moment I forgot the tension with his parents. His embrace was pure, honest, untouched by the greed that had slowly poisoned Julie and Brad. He whispered that he was glad I came, and I believed him. But as the night unfolded, I began to notice things. Too many people at the table, 10, not the small family dinner I had been promised. Too many glasses of wine poured for me, refilled without asking. Too many rehearsed conversations about my real estate properties, my wealth, my future. And every time I tried to deflect, Julie smiled brighter. Brad raised another toast, and the strangers leaned in as if waiting for something. I told myself I was imagining it, that perhaps for once Julie genuinely wanted to celebrate as a family. After all, hadn't I been accused of being too suspicious, too guarded? Maybe I was the one who needed to relax. The wine was rich and smooth, loosening the knots of worry inside me. But then Tyler's hand touched mine under the table, firm and insistent, and when I met his eyes, they were filled with a fear so raw it sliced through my haze like a blade. "Grandma," he whispered, "we need to go, now." Julie noticed his urgency instantly. She leaned across the table, her smile tightening like a mask. "Tyler, what's wrong? We haven't even had dessert." Brad's voice followed, smooth but watchful. "Your grandmother was just starting to relax. Why don't you wait?" But Tyler's eyes never left mine. He wasn't joking. He wasn't exaggerating. He was terrified. And in that instant I trusted him more than I had trusted anyone in years. I stood ignoring the protests, ignoring Julie's voice telling me to sit back down. I let Tyler lead me out, my heart hammering in my chest. The night air hit me like cold water, sobering me instantly. Tyler grabbed my arm, pulled me toward the far end of the parking lot away from the restaurant windows. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone. "Grandma," he said, voice breaking, "they put something in your wine." The world spun around me. "What?" I heard them. "Yesterday. They got some drug from a friend who works at a vet clinic. They said it makes people confused, incompliant. They plan to use it tonight to make you sign papers upstairs. Legal documents. Transfer papers for Sullivan Properties." My stomach lurched. The haze I'd been feeling wasn't just the wine, it was poison. My own daughter had tried to drug me. "Are you sure?" I whispered, even as my body swayed under the weight of it. Tyler's face was pale, his jaw set. "I saw Mom slip it into your glass. I saw her." I pressed my hand to the side of the car we'd stopped beside, the metal cool against my palm. The betrayal burned through me hotter than any sedative could dull. My own blood, my daughter, my son-in-law. They hadn't just wanted my money, they wanted to take my life's work, everything I'd built, everything I'd fought for after my husband died. "Grandma, listen to me," Tyler said urgently. "There are lawyers upstairs right now, real lawyers. They're waiting to make it look official, like you agreed. If you go back inside, you'll lose everything." For a moment, all I could hear was the rushing in my ears, the sound of 40 years of hard work, of every property I had renovated, every tenant I had helped, every sleepless night building Sullivan Properties, about to be stolen with the stroke of a pen, while I sat drugged and smiling for witnesses. A taxi pulled into the lot. Tyler flagged it down with frantic waves. "You need to go to the hospital. Tell them you've been drugged. Get a blood test. Call the police while the evidence is still there." The driver rolled down the window. Tyler helped me inside, his hands steady even though his whole body trembled. He leaned down, eyes glistening with the weight of what he was doing. "I'm sorry, Grandma. But I couldn't let them do this to you, not to you. Tears filled my eyes as I reached for his hand. You saved me, sweetheart. You saved everything. As the taxi pulled away, I saw him in the mirror. My grandson standing small and alone under the streetlight, shoulders heavy with the knowledge that from this night on, nothing between him and his parents would ever be the same. The taxi's headlights cut through the dark streets as I sat trembling in the back seat, replaying Tyler's words in my head. They put something in your wine. The nausea that churned in my stomach was no longer just from the drug, it was from the betrayal, sharp and unbearable. When my husband died 20 years ago, I told myself the only thing that mattered was keeping our family together. I worked night and day to build Sullivan Properties into something stable, something lasting. I thought I was teaching Julie responsibility, teaching her the value of hard work. But as I sat there, my body heavy with the sedative coursing through me, I realized I had been blind. Julie hadn't been learning. She had been waiting for the moment she could take what she believed she deserved without lifting a finger. At the hospital, the staff moved quickly once they heard the word drugged. Blood samples of fluids, a police officer summoned to take my statement. I was too weak to give them every detail, but I told them what I could. The officer's eyes hardened when I mentioned the lawyers upstairs waiting for forged signatures. Ma'am, he said firmly, if what you're saying is true, we need to act immediately. Do you want to press charges against your daughter and her husband? The question gutted me. Press charges against my own child. I had raised Julie, cradled her when she was sick, worked myself to the bone to give her a better life. And now here I was, lying in a hospital bed, asked to decide whether to brand her a criminal. But then I thought of Tyler, his small hands clutching mine under the table, his desperate whisper, the way his eyes had filled with terror when he begged me to leave. My daughter hadn't just tried to rob me, she had forced her son to be a witness to her crime. She had made him carry the weight of saving me. Yes, I whispered hoarsely, I'll press charges. By morning the sedative had left my system, but the ache in my heart remained. The police came back with updates. The restaurant had been raided, the so-called lawyers arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud. Julie and Brad were taken into custody, charged with attempted grand larceny and administering a controlled substance without consent. When I heard the words, I broke down. I cried for the little girl Julie once was, for the daughter I thought I had, for the mother I had failed to become. And I cried with gratitude that my grandson had been brave enough to do what his elders could not tell the truth. Later that afternoon, Tyler came to see me at the hospital. He looked pale, his shoulders tense like he had aged years overnight. When he stepped into the room, I opened my arms and he collapsed into them. I'm sorry, Grandma, he murmured into my shoulder. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't let them hurt you. You did everything right, I said, fiercely stroking his hair. You saved me, Tyler. You saved us both. His eyes filled with tears when he pulled back. But what about Mom? What's going to happen to her? The question pierced me deeper than any wound. How could I explain to a 13-year-old that sometimes the people we love most can destroy us, and the only way to survive is to let them face the consequences of their choices? They'll have to answer for what they did, I said carefully. But none of this is your fault. Do you understand me? None of it. He nodded, but I could see the guilt etched into his young face, the weight of being the one to expose his own mother. In the weeks that followed, the case unraveled like a nightmare spilling into daylight. The evidence was overwhelming: the drugs in Julie's purse, the drafted property transfer contracts, witness statements from 2 servers who had overheard whispers about papers upstairs. My daughter and son-in-law had not just planned this, they had rehearsed it, built it piece by piece, believing I was too trusting, too old, too blind to see. But they hadn't counted on Tyler. He became the star witness. His testimony steady, even when his voice shook. He told the court what he heard, what he saw, and how he knew his mother had slipped the substance into my wine. The judge listened closely, his face grim. I sat in the courtroom, my hand clutching Tyler's tightly, and realized that my grandson had shown more courage in those weeks than most adults ever muster in a lifetime. Yet the victory felt hollow. At night, alone in my bed, I replayed memories of Julie as a child, The way she used to braid daisies into my hair, the way she'd fall asleep against my chest after long days at the park. I couldn't reconcile that sweet girl with the woman who had plotted to rob me of everything. The verdict came swiftly: guilty. Brad received 10 years for conspiracy and attempted fraud. Julie, my own flesh and blood, was sentenced to 7. I sat in the courtroom as the words echoed, feeling both vindicated and broken. Justice had been served, but at the cost of my daughter's freedom, at the cost of my family's soul. Afterward, Tyler looked up at me with weary eyes. "Did we do the right thing, Grandma?" I cupped his face in my hands. "We did what we had to do. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts, but it's still the right thing." The months after the trial were the hardest I've ever lived through. The silence of the house pressed against me like a weight I couldn't shake. I would sit at the kitchen table with my tea growing cold, staring at the phone, half expecting Julie to call me, the way she used to when she was little and had a nightmare. But of course the phone never rang. She was gone behind bars, paying for what she had done. And yet, even knowing the damage she had intended, my heart ached in ways I couldn't put into words. Tyler tried to stay strong. He moved in with me full-time, carrying his school books and clothes into the bedroom that once belonged to his mother. I tried to make it warm for him. New curtains, fresh paint, a desk by the window. But no decoration could erase the truth: his mother had betrayed us both, and he was left in the wreckage. Sometimes I'd hear him at night whispering into his pillow, calling for her, as if she might step through the door and tuck him in. Those moments broke me more than anything else. One evening I found him sitting on the back porch, staring at the horizon. The sunset lit his face in shades of fire and gold, but his eyes were clouded with something older than his years. I sat beside him, letting the wooden boards creak under my weight. For a long time we didn't speak. Finally he whispered, "Grandma, do you think she ever loved me?" The question pierced me deeper than a blade. I wanted to wrap him in reassurances, to tell him his mother had adored him with every breath, but the truth hung between us like smoke. Julie had loved perhaps once, but her love had been twisted by greed and resentment, until it no longer resembled the devotion a mother should give. I pulled him into my arms, feeling his thin shoulders tremble. "Of course she loved you," I said softly, because even in betrayal I believed there had to be a part of Julie that still remembered what it was to hold her baby in her arms. "But she lost her way, Tyler. Love doesn't excuse what she did, but it was there. I have to believe it was." He nodded, though I knew the answer hadn't healed him. Maybe nothing ever truly would. Life became a fragile routine. I drove him to school, made him lunches, sat through his soccer games with my hands clasped tight to keep from crying when he glanced at the empty bleachers where his parents should have been. Teachers praised his resilience. His grades stayed high, but at home I saw the cracks. He carried guilt that wasn't his to carry, believing he had destroyed his family by speaking the truth. I reminded him again and again, "You didn't destroy anything. You saved me. You saved yourself." But the words often felt too small against the shadows in his eyes. One Saturday, as we cleaned out the attic, Tyler stumbled upon a box of old photo albums. He flipped through pages of Julie as a child, gap-toothed smiles, birthday cakes, summers at the lake. He lingered on one photo, Julie no older than 6, sitting on her father's shoulders, while I held her hand. "She looked so happy," he murmured. "She was," I replied, my throat tightening. "We all were." He studied the photo for a long time before tucking it into his backpack. Later that night I saw him slip it into the pocket of his jacket, carrying it like a fragile treasure. I didn't stop him. Maybe he needed to remember that once his mother had been someone worth loving. The seasons changed. Snow fell, spring returned, and little by little the wounds began to scar over. But they never disappeared. Betrayal doesn't leave clean edges. It leaves jagged marks that catch on everything. Sometimes when I lay awake at night, I wondered if I had done the right thing pressing charges, if I had fought hard enough to save Julie before it came to this, if I had failed as a mother long before that night in the restaurant. But then I'd hear Tyler stirring in his room, his voice carrying into the dark as he recited lines for a school play, or practiced his debate speech. His strength reminded me why we had chosen the path we did. Justice wasn't only for me, it was for him too, for his future. One afternoon months later, a letter arrived from the prison. I recognized Julie's handwriting, instantly sharp. and slanted like it had always been. My hand shook as I opened it. "Mom," it began. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not from you, not from Tyler. I can't explain why I did what I did, except that I was drowning in bitterness I never let go of. I told myself I deserved your success, your money, your properties, things I never earned. I hate what I've become, but I can't undo it now. I just want you to know that I do love Tyler, I always have. Tell him that if he can believe it." Tears blurred the words. I passed the letter to Tyler later that evening. He read it silently, then folded it carefully, and placed it in the same jacket pocket where he had kept the photograph. He didn't say much, just a quiet, "At least she admitted it." For the first time, I saw a hint of peace in his expression. The letter from Julie marked a turning point, though not in the way I first expected. It didn't erase the betrayal, and it didn't magically mend the years of hurt that had led us here. But for Tyler, it was something, a thread of truth he could cling to. He carried that letter with him everywhere, folded and worn, as if her words, however broken, proved she hadn't forgotten him completely. For me, the letter stirred up ghosts I had buried deep. Memories of Julie before the bitterness took root. Her laughter ringing through the halls when she was a girl, the way she used to curl up against me during thunderstorms, whispering that she felt safe when I held her. Those images collided with the woman who had tried to drug me, who had schemed with her husband to strip me of everything. I often found myself weeping quietly at night, torn between grief for the daughter I lost, and fury at the woman she became. Tyler, though, was changing. The trial had aged him, but it had also given him a resilience I never expected from someone so young. He threw himself into his studies, joining debate club, writing essays that spoke of justice, betrayal, and resilience. Teachers told me he had a gift with words, that he carried a weight in his speeches that made people listen. I knew why, because he had lived the kind of truth most children are spared. One evening after dinner, he surprised me. "Grandma," he said, his voice steady, "I've been thinking. When I grow up, I want to be a lawyer." I blinked back tears. "A lawyer?" He nodded. "So no one else has to go through what we did. So people like Mom and Brad can't get away with hurting families. I want to fight for people who don't know how to fight for themselves." The pride that swelled in my chest nearly broke me. Out of the ashes of betrayal, he was already envisioning a future built on justice. "You'd be an incredible lawyer," I whispered, pulling him close. "Your heart is strong enough to carry the truth." The months became years. Julie remained behind bars, and though her letters arrived every few months, they carried a different tone than the first. Some were remorseful, others angry and defensive. I never knew which Julie I would hear from. Tyler read them all quietly, never tearing them up or throwing them away. Instead, he kept them in a shoebox under his bed alongside that one photograph of her as a little girl. He said he wanted to remember all of her, not just the worst parts. That was his strength. Where I saw only scars, he sought pieces of healing. Then came the day we went to visit her. Tyler had turned 15, taller, now his voice deeper. He told me he wanted to see his mother, that he was ready. I wasn't sure, but I took him anyway. The prison walls loomed cold and gray as we walked through security, the clanging of doors echoing like a warning. When Julie appeared dressed in the faded uniform of her sentence, my heart clenched. She looked older, her beauty dimmed, but her eyes softened when she saw Tyler. "Mom," he said simply, sitting across from her. His voice didn't waver. "Tyler." Tears sprang instantly to her eyes. She reached for his hands, though the table kept them apart. "You've grown so much." He nodded. "I have." Silence stretched before he finally said, "I read your letters. I know you love me. But love isn't enough when you hurt people. You hurt Grandma, you hurt me." Julie's face crumpled and she began to sob. "I know. I wish I could take it back." Tyler's eyes stayed steady, unwavering. "You can't. But you can do better now. You can choose to change." I sat there watching my grandson hold his mother accountable with more grace than most adults could manage. It was as if he had taken the shards of betrayal and turned them into a mirror, forcing her to see herself for who she had become and who she could still be if she chose. When the visit ended, Tyler walked out taller, somehow lighter. He didn't cry, he didn't rage, he simply said, "I told her what I needed to say." That night, as I tucked him in, I realized something profound. The boy who had once whispered in terror at a restaurant table had grown into a young man with a voice strong enough to confront even his deepest wounds. The betrayal had scarred us both, yes, but in Tyler it had also planted a seed of courage, and for the first time in years, I felt something new, blooming alongside the grief hope. Years later, when I look back on that night at the Riverside Grill, I realize it was both the darkest and most defining moment of my life. Darkness because I had to face the truth that my own daughter, my flesh and blood, was willing to poison me for money. Defining because it was the night my grandson stepped into the light and became my savior. Time didn't erase the scars. Julie served her sentence, and though she was released eventually, things between us never returned to what they once were. There were attempts at reconciliation, stilted phone calls, a few tense visits, but the fracture was too deep. I forgave her in my heart, because bitterness would have destroyed me. But forgiveness did not mean forgetting. Trust once shattered never returns to the way it was. Brad faded into the background of our lives, swallowed by his own prison term and poor choices. We rarely spoke of him. It was Julie's absence and the constant ache of what could have been that lingered most. But Tyler, Tyler became the embodiment of resilience. At 16, he stood before his high school classmates and delivered a speech about integrity that left the room silent. At 17, he won a statewide debate competition, arguing passionately about justice for vulnerable families. I sat in the audience with tears streaming down my face, remembering the boy who once clutched my hand under a table begging me to trust him. By the time he was accepted into law school, there was no doubt in my mind he had taken the shards of his broken childhood and forged them into a weapon for good. One night, years later, as we sat together on the porch watching the stars, he turned to me. "Grandma," he said softly, "do you ever regret pressing charges against Mom?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it carefully before answering. I regret what led us there. I regret that she made those choices. But pressing charges, no. If we hadn't, we'd have lost everything, not just the money, but our dignity, our safety, even our bond. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that protect us. He nodded slowly, his profile strong against the moonlight. I think about that night a lot. About how different things could have been if I'd stayed quiet. I reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. "You were braver than any adult in that room. You saved me. You saved us both." His eyes shone with the weight of my words. "I didn't want to be brave, Grandma. I just didn't want to lose you." In that moment, I realized the true legacy I was leaving him wasn't my business or my properties. It was the strength to stand up against betrayal, even when it came from the people we loved most. Now, as I share this story, I want anyone listening to know something. Betrayal may break your heart, but it doesn't have to break you. Sometimes the ones who save us are not who we expect. They may be younger, smaller, or quieter, but their courage burns bright enough to guide us through the darkest nights. Tyler taught me that. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt the weight of family secrets crushing you, I want you to remember this: trust your instincts, trust those who love you truly, and never believe that blood alone defines family. Actions do. Love does. Courage does. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you've ever faced betrayal and found strength you didn't know you had. Your story matters too, and someone out there may need to hear it.